Hello, everybody, and welcome to Nathan on Shuffle and to my latest episode of New Album Spotlight, the show where I put the spotlight on a new album in progressive rock or related genres, a way to bring attention to lesser-known artists and to be able to talk about the albums I'm really loving and to proclaim that prog is not dead. It's not a music form that died in the 70s, but it's alive and active today, and there's plenty of young, great artists bringing this genre forward and bringing new life into it. And that's what I wanted to talk about today with the artist Dominic Sanderson. And this is his album Blazing Revelations. And this is a fantastic work from a young musician. I always get excited. I talked recently about Jacob Roberge and his new album, The Passing, which is also excellent from a new young musician. Dominic Sanderson is a young fellow from Wakefield, West Yorkshire, drawing inspiration from a lot of English classic prog bands like King Crimson, Pink Floyd. Hear a bit of Van der Graaf Generator in the sound here as well. As well as drawing from some modern prog influences like Steven Wilson or even like a Wobbler and bands like that. So it's a real hodgepodge of really cool new and old classic prog all wrapped together in a really cool stew of music. And it's very eclectic, very avant-garde at times, but it's really wonderfully executed and sounds like it could be plucked straight out of the 70s at times. And I just was really blown away by this album as I've been listening to it. This is the second album by Dominic Sanderson. The first was called Impermanence and came out in 2023, which I did check out. So that one's 2 years ago. And I was really impressed and really excited about him as a young artist. I don't believe I featured it on the channel. Maybe I did it as a shorter review in one of my compilation type review episodes, but it was a really impressive first album that showcased a really cool young talent. I thought that it was a little bit too amateur in the production for me, and a lot of songs kind of meandered and didn't have much of a footing, especially the bigger, lengthier epics. But I feel like my reservations from the first album have all gone away for this new album. I feel like he fixed any of the little nitpicky things that I didn't care for in the first record and has produced an excellent record that I'm really happy to share with you guys, to call one of my favorite albums of the year, and to add Dominic Sanderson to my ever-expanding Rolodex of excellent new prog artists. And like I've mentioned, this album, what's cool about it to me is that it really is a hodgepodge of all the classic 70s prog artists that I love and that many of you love, I would imagine. Van der Graaf Generator, I think, is the biggest key influence on this record in particular. King Crimson also is very well present here, especially some of the more avant-garde, some of the heavy sax use, some of the cooler kind of interesting guitar tones and things. But there's also a bit of classic Genesis in the mix too, with some really wide use of mellotron and even some more 12-string acoustic guitar style passages as well in some of the tracks. So you get a lot of diversity. I even heard a little bit of Gentle Giant in the mix, especially in the shortest track of the record, A Right of Wrongs. So I was just really in love with this record. Sometimes I feel like the playing and maybe the production can sound a bit dated or a bit messy perhaps, but I think that adds kind of to the charm of the album. It doesn't really distract from it to me. It doesn't take anything away, and it just makes it feel more organic and more real, and like you're in the studio with these musicians, hearing them play firsthand and exploring this incredible music, which is extremely adventurous and extremely exciting. There's several longer length tracks on this record. It's a great length for a prog record. It's about 45 minutes long, which seems to be what a lot of artists are kind of doing now, is creating albums that would easily fit on vinyl, perhaps. So we get From the Weeping Cradle to open this record. It's a 12-minute track. Begins with a pretty funky clavinet sound before we get a cool groovy drum beat and a King Crimson-esque saxophone. Get some cool prog mellotron in the background with some furious playing and adding some light flute into the mix. And you get this really cool expressive opening, like a swirling kaleidoscope of classic 70s prog. I love the bass line, some dark mellotron, some crazy percussion, that heavy Van der Graaf Generator sax. You get little touchstones of Jethro Tull with some of the flute sounds. You get a little bit of Yes with some of the more chaotic elements and some of the harmony vocals that come in later in the mix. There's some cool Hammond organs, some groovy bass lines, and a more psychedelic groove before we get into almost a disco beat and some furious guitar playing. It's a pretty extended instrumental opening that takes quite some time before we get any sort of vocals. It takes about 6 minutes into the track. And the vocals, especially on this track and on several other moments on the record, are very reminiscent of Peter Hamill. And I find that to be interesting. Maybe not, I'm not like your biggest Van der Graaf Generator fan in the world. And sometimes it's Peter Hamill's vocals that aren't quite to my taste. And for similar reasons, I'm not sure I'm completely in love with the vocal work here. But I think it favors emotion and character and expressiveness rather than beautiful melody. And I think that works with this kind of classic homage feel to Van der Graaf Generator and telling these stories and really evoking the emotions and the craziness on display in the musicality. So sometimes the vocals can be a bit harsh for me, not like growling vocals like in like death metal stuff that I tend to talk about here, but more just like really emotive and like this kind of talking style vocal at time that can be filled with anguish and power. And it's really interesting, and it grows on me as the record goes along and I start to understand. And there are more melodic vocal moments as well that kind of balance it out a bit more. But that's something to expect. If you're a big Van der Graaf fan and a big Peter Hamill fan, then this is a no-brainer. You'll feel all those same feelings. You'll definitely see the homage to that era and to that band. So, and sometimes, like I said, the mix can make it feel a bit messy. The drums aren't perfectly in tune and timed and everything else. But I think, like I said, it adds this organic feel. It feels real and it feels like it's actual musicians playing this music and really excelling at what they're doing. It doesn't sound like there's too much studio trickery that's taking away from the actual performances here that the band's putting down. And so you get a lot more of that swirling cacophony in the sound. Some violin is also added to the mix here, some stabbing organ, some saxophone. You get kind of that ominous vibe, and the music kind of morphs and shifts. Sometimes it's furious and fast. Sometimes it's a bit more slow-paced and thoughtful, but there's always kind of this undercurrent of this like ominous tone and this kind of inner darkness that's being worked with here. But it's just a really fun track, a really fun opening that showcases what you can come to expect from the record. Faithless Folly is the second track, a little over 10 minutes long. And it runs the gamut between a lot of these same different styles as well. You get these strange acoustic guitar chords at the beginning, which somehow feel beautiful and warm, but also strangely dissonant at the same time. We get these strange swirling dissonant vocals, some Crimson-esque guitar chords, some Van der Graaf Generator sax coming in the background. And once it hits that groove, we're in full-blown Van der Graaf Generator mode with some off-kilter sounds, saxophone, mellotron, and flute lines. And I like how there is a bit of a Canterbury flavor in this track as well. There's a groove that comes in that really reminds me of that era. Also shades of Agusa as well, kind of this folkier feel, this kind of Norwegian prog kind of aesthetic as well. You get some wild guitar soloing leading into some great organ soloing. You get that kind of disco beat feel once again. And it's just delightful fun as it morphs and weaves through these different sections. Sometimes it can feel a bit chaotic and a bit all over the place. If you're not a fan of kind of a lot of disparate sections kind of assaulting you from different directions, this could be a little bit overwhelming. But I think it all works. It all kind of makes sense once you listen to these pieces over and over again. You kind of get the feel for what's going on, and it starts to kind of meld and become a singular piece of music. You get some fluid guitar lines, some mellotrons, some Peter Hamill style vocals, some eerie sounds, and those kind of Van der Graaf Generator or King Crimson-y kind of stabs of saxophone. And it all quiets down to some soft acoustic guitar to end this track out. Fantastic, very, varied and interesting, always keeping the listener on their toes, and it's just a fantastic expression of music. A Right of Wrongs is the shortest track on the record, and it's a bit more subdued, a bit more acoustic. You get the sounds of some fire blazing in the background, some tasteful mellotron, flutes and acoustic guitar bring a more melodic and impassioned vocal. And even though it's kind of the ballad of the record, it still has a lot of progginess there. It still has a lot of complexity, a lot of different elements coming at the forefront. You get some almost spoken word vocals at parts. You get some added violin and flutes. And like I said, sometimes this reminds me of kind of some early Gentle Giant with a bit of a folkier, more medieval type sound to it as well. And then the big epic comes at the end, Lullaby for a Broken Dream, which, like the first two tracks, has just a lot of wild stuff going on in the mix, but it has different sections, moments where it quiets down and is more beautiful and majestic. It starts out more in that kind of lighter vein, kind of continuing forward from where A Right of Wrongs left off with some acoustic guitar, mellotron, and dreamy vocals. At points in this track, I'm almost reminded of that kind of 12-string style Genesis feel. We get some almost atmospheric and dreamy sections as well, but it is always intercut with kind of these heavier, more groove-laden sections where the band's really furiously playing their hearts out with those kind of saxophone stabs and big swirling mellotron sounds and, some almost near distorted guitars. And it's just really fun how it shifts between these modes expertly well. And there's so many cool build-ups and so many fun grooves that just keep you entertained and interested throughout the piece. And it really ends with this big majestic feel at the end. You get this acoustic guitar and singing and violin that carries forth this kind of final melody, this great classical tinged piano and shredding guitar soloing, some added mellotron brings it all together. I feel like the way this ending bit kind of builds, adding instruments as it continues forward, adding some mellotron, adding some sax and flutes, kind of gives you the icing on the cake that you needed to bring this epic home, and is played out in excellent fashion, closing the record in a brilliant way. So this is just a fantastic record. Dominic Sanderson is a new, exciting young talent in the scene, and I'm always really excited to spotlight new talent, to showcase that the genre isn't dead, that there's these young, talented individuals bringing this music forward to a new generation. As for the lineup on this record, Dominic Sanderson handles the electric and acoustic guitars, vocals, and mellotron. Tristan Apperly plays bass and violin. Jacob Hackett plays drums and percussion. Mba Adali plays mellotron, Hammond organ, clavinet, Fender Rhodes, and piano. And Andy Frizzell plays some tenor, alto, and baritone saxophones and flute, with Joshua Joyner on percussion and Massimo Pieretti on piano, guesting on the record. So a great lineup. This record has a bit more of a band feel than the previous record did. I feel like the previous one felt more like a full-blown solo effort. But I feel like this is a really cool group putting this together, crafting a really excellent record that can be loved by older fans of the genre as well as new young people who are just getting into it. And I think it's fabulous. And hopefully it'll bring more attention into the genre, especially from some younger people who are drawn in by a younger force bringing this music to light in a more modern era. It's a bit of an underground release. I don't think it's getting a ton of attention, but it should. Hopefully reviews like this, and I know some of my fellow YouTuber friends are also going to be reviewing this one. Hopefully that brings this fabulous music to light, and you guys are willing to give it a chance because it's just really fun and really worth your time. So thank you guys for joining me for this review. Sorry if my voice is a little ragged. I just, it's towards the end of the day. Usually I like to film these on Fridays in the mornings, but I just didn't have time, and I'm trying to squeeze this one in to have something to put forward this week as a review. So hopefully you guys can forgive me and you've enjoyed the content here, and I'll hopefully catch you in future episodes. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. I do these reviews regularly. There's a bunch more coming. There's tons of prog releases coming out in the next couple months that I'm going to be talking about, and hopefully you guys are excited as I am. So thank you guys for joining me. I'll see you guys in future episodes, and enjoy the music, everybody. See ya.